Hi everyone, I was a paramedic for 10 years in Australia before being diagnosed with PTSD 7 years ago. I have seen and experienced the underbelly of a thriving, normal society. I've met some amazing people, I've seen death and also stopped it in its tracks. But I've also got stories about the fun times, pranks we played on each other, and a lot of dark humor. I'm still going through the healing process, but I'm at a point where I want to share my experience with others. Ask me anything. Hello. I had considered studying paramedics at uni, ACU, I ended up going with midwifery, and I echo the comments of everything applauding you for how hard you and others work/have worked. One for me, I guess, from someone who deals with emergency scenarios often, obviously at a drastically different level to what you would have experienced. I want to know if you found your coping mechanisms kind of subconsciously and slowly broke down? I don't know if that makes sense, but some of my co-workers comment on the pragmatic way I deal with death and trauma by completely removing myself emotionally, and I am worried that as the demands in healthcare just continue to ramp up with short staffing, shit pay, expectations beyond our means, etc., if I will begin to slowly lose these coping mechanisms, or if the past trauma of what I have seen will one day hit me in the face. Obviously that is totally unanswerable, but I would love to hear your perspective on coping in traumatic situations when it's your 9 to 5, or 0700 to 1900 ha. Thanks for your role in midwifery. I understand exactly what you mean with your question, because this is what it was like for me. It snuck up on me until my first ever panic attack. Earlier in my career I kept up my social circles and exercised to maintain my mental health. But over time I became exhausted and stopped participating in sports, etc. It was a symptom that I was struggling, but I only see that in hindsight. It's different for everyone. Some people I worked with were very detached and pragmatic. I think it protected them from the emotional toll. But, in my opinion, it made them less empathetic towards their patients. I say that because for me I think I maybe gave too much empathy, and that contributed to my burnout. I have heard from long-term paramedics that everyone has a black box where they file away the trauma, and that box can only hold so much before it overflows. There are some paramedics who worked in this field for their entire working career, so maybe they had lots of space to file away the trauma. I don't know what I'm trying to say, but maybe you don't have anything to worry about. If you're asking yourself these questions, that's a good thing. Keep asking yourself and assess it regularly so you can make any changes you need to take care of yourself. As a colleague to the state in the East, your uniform is very easily identifiable. Not sure if that's a bother to you or not, more just thinking in line of doxing. My question for you is this. Do you feel that you were adequately prepared for the realities of the job? And secondly, do you think that the realities of the job contributed to your cumulative stress trauma, as it tends to lull people into a false sense of security before turning very quickly? E.g., driving to a non-acute job to being diverted to a high-stress low-occurrence job like a PAED versus car traumatic arrest? Thanks for your time in the job. It's a great job, but it can ruin lives. I figured as much with my uniform. I mostly wanted to hide my face, and if anyone wants to dox me then they can delete their account XD. I wasn't adequately prepared for the realities, in the stress management sense. And as you would know, reality is much different from theory. Once I connected those dots after being exposed to cases, I can absolutely say uni students need more preparation with placements, etc. than what was available when I did my study. I don't even recall PTSD being brought up. That's changed now here, thankfully. Second part, I didn't mind being diverted, as my mindset at the time felt more prepared for a high acuity job. I trained interns as well, so that may have played a part. Thank you as well for your service. 1. What made you want to be a paramedic as opposed to another kind of medical professional? 2. What do you think about the sentiment that while one person may be having the worst day of their lives, emergency responders have to deal with people having the worst days of their lives every day? 1. I grew up in a home that supported and helped less fortunate members of the community. So for me it was a natural progression to continue helping others. As for paramedics over another medical profession, I was always interested in biology and the human body, but I really enjoy variety in my work, so thought paramedics would be even more suitable for me over emergency medicine in a hospital. 2. Difficult one to answer, but the most simplistic way I can explain how I feel about it is that I signed up for anything and everything, to be there for people in their emergencies, but you're never fully prepared to see as much as we do. If you know, you know. Have you ever arrived on a scene and looked at the patient and thought, this person is definitely dead, then worked on them and they weren't? No, and I'll briefly explain why, because it's quite complex. If a patient has a sudden cardiac arrest with no obvious known cause, there are still some signs of life for a period of time. For example, complexion can tell you a lot about their oxygen levels and blood circulation, e.g. pink and warm would tell us it was recent, or there was bystander CPR, which has a higher chance of a successful resuscitation. In contrast, same scenario, if they're cyanotic, blue/gray, they haven't had as much blood perfusion to their vital organs and therefore have worse outcomes. The obvious deaths would have signs such as rigor mortis, lividity, or a visual cause, think more gruesome. I could see these signs of life and know that this person can potentially be saved. So for me, even if a patient has no heartbeat, I wouldn't necessarily say they're definitely dead. Hope that answers your question. Gosh, so many more things I could say. Thank you, I admire those that can do this so much. What are you doing to overcome PTSD? I've been in therapy for my PTSD, but it seems that 10 years of cumulative and insidious trauma takes a lot longer to work through than I realized. I'm hoping to try EMDR soon to see if this works for me to make healing quicker and more effective. I've tried multiple antidepressant medication, but they didn't work for me. Talking about my experiences has been helping me recently to consolidate what I've experienced and give me a different perspective. For example, I've begun to see the silver linings and I now can remember the better times. I have 2 cousins doing the work right now. They said they have infinite debrief/emergency psychiatric hours they can pull on at any time. One of them had an incident out of uniform. They were required to go through debrief before they could be reactivated. The uniform partly sets a shield, knowing things will happen while in uniform. How are Australia doing on that part? Could you talk to a professional? Massive props to your cousins for their service. I'm very happy to hear they have such a high level of support. It was available to an extent. Peer support would message or call after a flag job. But a lot would slip through the net. And the psych support would be up to the para to organize, and it pissed me off when I went once and the DH said I should have come earlier. So that system was flawed during my time. As for proper debriefs, I found them inadequate and rare. I recall many times being paged while still at hospital handing over patients and/or restocking our kits after a hectic job, and I reached a point where I'd say over the radio for them to give us some effing time. One time we got paged we were still cleaning blood of the floor and walls of the ambulance. So, in essence, there are a lot of changes/improvements needed in that regard. Best stories you have to share? Am I right to assume by best you mean best outcomes? It's very hard to choose because every case is so different and can't be compared in that way. But cases with children really stand out. Saving a sick child and seeing the relief and gratitude on the parents' faces really makes you feel good in a job where you're exposed to so much suffering. Did you get PTSD from the job? If so, how can you continue to work in the field if you'll be exposed to more of the same? I did get PTSD from the job. I've included more details in another comment. I haven't worked on the road in 7 years, since my diagnosis. I don't know if I'll ever be able to return to that type of work. For now I'm keeping my options open as I work through the traumas of the past. Do you have any advice on getting through the intern year? The pressure is immense. Oh, I remember my first shift as an intern being very daunting. It's perfectly normal to feel this way. I would suggest finding a mentor you really click with, can offer you extra time, and help you figure out your own practice. It's also important to try and work with many different paras to see how they operate, etc. Ask a lot of questions. There are no stupid questions. I tried to do as many scenarios, off-duty, with my mentors to improve my clinical knowledge and skill set. I would be constantly doing extra research, right up until my last shift, because I hated the thought of turning up to a scene without being on the ball. That said, everyone gets out of their depth at times, and call for extra/higher levels of clinical support as soon as you can. Take every case and talk about it in detail, or do your own audits, on top of the mandatory audits, and you'll continue to become an amazing paramedic. Ultimately, you'll be learning and growing your entire career, and so is everyone else. You're not alone in this.